Jesus Christ.
What?
Carrie's throwing shit down the stairs and got some weird stuck to her head. Okay. I'm making a very serious podcast. Don't shake an ice cream cone at me. Keep that in. That's gold.
All right. Anyway, okay. All right, you ready to do the episode?
Oh, wait, this isn't the episode? Holy shit.
You ready to do the rest of the episode?
Hell yeah.
You want to do the intro?
Oh. Am I?
Yeah. Yes, please. I insist.
Okay. Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Jaunty Mantis podcast, a podcast about tabletop role-playing games and the nerds who ask creative questions about them. I'm Jesse, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Maddie. Say hi, Maddie.
Oh, hi, Maddie. Shit. No. Hi. Okay. How's it going? That joke's done.
How you doing?
Doing good.
What season are we in again?
Season 4.
Oh, listener questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Also known as the Sam season, because our creative question is again from Sam today.
Yeah, and unlike the summer of Sam, this is actually going to be a good thing because we got a bunch of questions. So the season of Sam has a bunch of great topics that our listeners wrote in about. And today's episode, our topic is handling boredom at the table. So thank you so much, Sam, for this topic. Jesse, what does that mean to you, boredom at the table? What do you, more specifically, what to do when your players get bored?
Yeah,
at your game, with your game.
I think the first thing you got to do is to recognize what are the signs of player boredom. That's first. What have you seen traditionally? I'd say like checking your phone all the goddamn
time. Oh yeah, the phone is the easiest culprit, right? Go ahead.
Oh, this is just going to be really hard for me because the signs of boredom at the table are also, I used to be a teacher. The signs of boredom in a classroom are the same. So, it's going to be traumatizing for me to describe these.
Right. The phone one's the easy culprit, though. You know, somebody who's just constantly on their phone, they're obviously not participating. You have to remind them to do things. You know, usually people are hungry to take their turn. You know, especially in combat, you know, or they're hungry to be involved depending on the level of commitment of your players. Your more quiet players are still focused, are still observing and waiting for their moment. But the phone is an easy indicator.
Yeah, I think, too, to what you said, one of the key decision points you have to make here, too, that at least I try to make is that player's boredom disruptive to the overall vibe or not?
Yeah.
So if that player's on their phone because they've just taken their turn in initiative and it's going to be a while before it gets back to them, and I know that they're going to be like, when it's their turn, able to jump in, I'm probably not going to chalk that one up as boredom. But yeah, checking phones, disengagement, lack of participation, not floating ideas, all those signs of boredom at the table. I've talked about this on the podcast before. This is why I can't watch actual plays when they have that camera setup of the whole table, because my DM instinct sees someone doing one of those things, which is probably totally fine for their table. And I'm like, but that player's not engaged.
You're not wrong. I totally understand that. Yeah. There's another thing, and I notice it in our games. I've done it myself, so no harm or foul. You know, pre-COVID, I was not a fan of Zoom-based games or internet-based games for just this reason. As Jesse just described, there are moments where you look at the different quadrants in the Zoom meeting and you see that person who's obviously focused on a different part of their screen, or maybe even their second monitor, and they're clearly watching a video or reading. You can see it in their eyes, the way their eyes are moving. Sometimes you can even see it in the reflection of their glasses too, which I've noticed. Oh shit, I've seen that cartoon before. Okay, Yeah, we're not exactly engaged at this Zoom D&D game here, but
to be fair, these are just oversized fidgets, and I'm still paying attention while I'm transforming them.
Yeah, I mean, like there are those circumstances where, like Jesse, I know will sometimes paint miniatures during game, but he's never not engaged. So
yeah, I'm listening because I listen to audiobooks and stuff while I paint. It takes no part of my brain to paint.
Yeah. And I used to know somebody at a physical table that used to do something similar. I'm trying to remember what it was, like something crafty, something with their hands. Was it whittling? No. I'll think of it later. But something similar was like they were always engaged and paying attention and participating, but they were still looking down at whatever it is they were working on. And I'm struggling to remember what that was. So I have seen that in person as well. What are the other signs that you know from your teaching experience?
I mean, that's side talk.
Okay.
A lot of side conversation is usually a sign that people are checking out. That's just one category of lack of engagement. I don't know that like goofing off and making jokes is a sign of disengagement. I think that's just the way some people engage. The appropriacy may vary depending on your session zero expectations. I think that's most of the signs, like someone's on their phone, having a side conversation, or just not, you asking them questions or not really jumping in. Those are the signs. Let's talk a little bit about why players get bored.
Okay.
Because this is the area where I think as someone running a game, you might have a little bit of control, whereas like the actual behavior, you don't, but the cause, some of it could come, some of it could very well be internal to that player, and then some of it could be from what's happening at the table. So why do you think players get bored at the table?
I mean, I want to speak from my own experience first, because my first inclination was to be like, Jesse, I'm an amazing GM. Nobody ever gets bored at my table, but they totally have. It happens. But then I started thinking like, well, what have I done? Because I don't want to hold myself above this. I have done this. I have been disrespectful towards the rest of the group, specifically the GM, and gotten bored and done, checked out. So, when I've gotten bored, there was a gaming experience where the GM was basically monologuing everything. Like there wasn't really an opportunity for any of us to have a lot of agency in that game, which was really weird for me. Like I had never encountered this before. It was a very dominant style of running a game where it was like, the GM sets up the situation and then asks you what you do. And then you start to say, well, my character is going to, look around the room and they're looking for any signs of a struggle. And then you're about to say something else. And the GM then would just override you. Like, well, that's great, because you did see a struggle. And here's what happened is you're looking around the room and they're basically narrating my actions for me and making decisions for me. And I don't really even get a chance to be like, well, no, that's not. And then I'm just like, fuck it, forget it.
Yeah, I like to, when a PC or a player gives me an answer for what their character does, if they don't fill in that narration, like on combat, I might zhuzh it up with a description, but I'm never going to override. So that's the one that like I tend to get bored when there's just like wall of text.
Yeah.
And like, we're a massive lore dump with no character, no chance to, like engage with. I just kind of like, I feel bad because I love stories. I love encyclopedia entries about imaginary place, but when someone's just telling it to me, and I guess they're not on a podcast, like I kind of check out. So that's, spotlight. You ever seen somebody get bored because maybe you're not giving them enough spotlight time? That one creates like this whole terrible feedback loop.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, like someone's like starting to check out because they don't feel like they're getting their spotlight, and you see them checking out. So you're kind of like, if you get mad, I mean, the thing to do when you're a teacher, and I think the thing to do at the table is if someone's checking out and getting bored, you suddenly like, spotlight, surprise. But maybe you're just like, oh, well, they're not really engaged. I haven't been getting good answers. Maybe they're just not feeling it. So I'm going to give the spotlight to someone else.
Yeah.
That's the generous way I'll describe how that could possibly happen while you're running a game.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, the rules here as I see them, like the way to engage this problem, like you mentioned, is kind of similar to like if you're having trouble in a social situation. Like I'm a person who for a good portion of my life thought I was an introvert and then discovered I'm actually an extrovert. And like what an interesting crossover that turned out to be. And part of that process was a friend of mine gave me a great set of advice where I was just like, how do I get more comfortable in social situations? And she would like, just ask questions.
Yeah, people love to talk about themselves.
Yeah, she's like, you'll do great in a social situation if you just ask thoughtful, measured questions. She's like, they don't even have to be thoughtful. You know, you just have to seem genuinely interested in what somebody thinks. And that can help you kind of just become more of a social person. So when I find boredom at the table, I start asking questions from the players who I think are bored, you know?
Yeah, that's solutions.
Yeah. But I think it speaks to your point about like, if a person is bored, it's probably because they're not getting enough of a chance to tell you about who their character is through playing the game. You know, D&D is a social activity. A player character is an extension of who that player is. And so the same rules apply. Like the game is an opportunity for them to talk about themselves. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You just got to be there to like make cool stuff happen for them to talk about themselves in, and then kind of break it up so everybody gets a chance to do that.
Yeah.
I think another reason too, and you touched on this, and I'm just remembering this horrible game we played at Gen Con.
Oh my God, yes. I still had fun though.
I had fun like shit talking that guy to this day, but
describe it.
So I'm going to just call this one a lack of meaningful choices is a reason that players get bored at your table. We were playing this game that was like the guy's custom homebrew using the supernatural role-playing game rules, which I guess is the same as the Buffy and Angel RPGs. I don't know what the broader name for that system is. Again, listeners, if you know the name of what that whole system is called, write in johntymantis@gmail.com. But like, he was just the most railroady thing ever. And we were like at a store in the mall or something. And like, we were trying to do things and be like, you wouldn't do that because you're a dragon. Like just straight up telling like players like their character wouldn't do that. And like, this was supposed to be, okay, there were some mitigating factors for this guy too. We did not know the vibe he was setting up. This was like the third group or the third adventure in a series of linked adventures that I think he had planned for people to sign up for all of them. And that hadn't happened. And we all came in as a group who all knew each other. And he was the only person who didn't know everybody at the table.
It was really awkward.
And it was super awkward.
Yes. If I'm remembering this correctly, there was a lot of like, well, you wouldn't do that because this, and this. And it was like, dude, are you playing this game with yourself? Right? Because like, we're the player characters. We're like, to kind of flesh this out a little bit more here, dear listener, what was happening was, if I'm remembering this correctly, Jesse will correct me. But like the dungeon master was over talking the player characters when they said they were doing certain things. He was basically saying your character wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? And it's like, well, because it's this big thing. And he would like cite all this stuff he had planned out. And it's like, well, hey man, I don't know what you thought this was going to be, but like, we're in control of these characters.
Yeah. I had that was my first like play experience, I think, at a con that wasn't just ad hoc. At like because I've never been a big con goer. Like at a Gen Con before, I had signed up for the D&D tournament.
Okay.
Have I told you this story?
No.
I signed up for the D&D tournament, which is basically like a speed run through this challenging dungeon. And like, I like, it was my first organized play Adventurers League thing I'd ever done in my life, but I just signed up for it because it happened to be in the slot. And I show up at the table. It's supposed to be this. I got this really officious kid who's like, I got the vibe he thought he was a big deal because he was a DM for the, like the Adventurers League. He had passed the test. You remember when I took that test?
Yes.
One of the questions is, what is the percentage chance you can recover an arrow after combat?
Oh, wow.
This is vital to know. And it was that vibe. Yeah. And so it starts in a tavern and we're supposed to get this mission. And I just start role-playing my character, just like totally getting into character. And then these two other older guys there totally pick up on the vibe and start doing it with me. So we got this DM who's trying to move us towards this timed scenario, and this one really try-hard guy who's getting progressively angrier and angrier. And then me and these two other older dudes who are just like, what dost thou do? Like totally hamming it up and having the best time. And then they invited me to join their Living Greyhawk game. And they had a henchman NPC that I could play for that character. So
beautiful.
Hung out with them for the rest of the day. And then I drove straight to Maine. So like,
I'm like picturing this game where the DM is like trying to rush you into the next room to fight these orcs. And you guys are like still out of the courtyard. Like, what do you think of these skulls, Bernard? Like, I think danger is afoot. What kind of danger do you think? Well, Julius, I think we may have orcs. And the GM's like, yes, orcs in the next room. And then you're like, wow, that must have been horrible for the two people that signed up.
Three of us.
Well, yeah, but it must have been horrible for the other two people. Like, it makes me wonder if that's like reverse bad behavior at the table, because you guys basically did the opposite of like a power gamer who's like taking over the table and like screwing everything up. You guys got some sort of weird pseudo revenge.
Yeah.
In that situation. Like, that poor fucking
we were doing a great job of turn taking and spotlight sharing. We kept trying to rope the other guy in. He's just, we've got to get this. Blah, blah, blah. But he's trying really hard to not say in character, we have a timer.
That poor guy. He's like, this is the style of game I want to play. That's what this is specifically done. I'm not going to piss anybody off. I'm just going to do the thing I like to do. We're all on the same page here. And then you three assholes are like, what is the weather like, Julius? Oh, a storm is approaching, I see.
Yeah, we were doing a great job of the things you do to avoid player boredom. We were turn-taking, sharing the spotlight. It was wonderful. I don't think we got past the first room in the actual dungeon before the timer went off.
Oh, perfect.
So we did not advance to the next round.
Yeah. So what is the appropriate response then to player boredom once you find it? I mean, yes, we have the solution in place of like just start asking them questions. But I do want to put kind of like a parentheses around this, because there is some feels that happen when you notice your player characters are bored. Most of us in gaming are kind of inward thinkers and inward feelers, where it's like, oh, they don't like my game. They're bored. I did something wrong. This sucks. I suck. This is terrible. And then
I tend to be like, I can do no wrong. They must be having a terrible day.
I was going to say,
bad for them.
Yeah, I was going to say there's an opposite version of this, which is like, fuck you, pay attention to my game. I worked hard on this.
The unearned confidence of a middle-aged white man. I wish everybody could have it. Like, I wish I could bottle it and give it away.
Yeah, that'd be a very powerful drug. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's the first thing you have to recognize is like, if you notice your players are bored, you kind of have to take a deep breath in order to deal with this problem, because if you start to show irritation, I think it's only going to make the situation worse.
Oh, yeah, you agree with that? You can't make it personal.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to
say. Like if you're at a con game or a game at your friendly local gaming store, like you don't know what's going on in that person's head. Why are you going to make it personal? I'm trying to remember. There's this term I heard at one of these corporate like training things we have to go to every once in a while in the corporate world. And I was like kind of paying attention this one. I hate to say I pay attention to these things because I want to be all cool and rebellious and this is all corporate bullshit, but you know, a job's a job. But there's this whole thing, it's some kind of bias that like when something bad happens to you, you are aware of all the external factors in the world that are shaping that cause this thing to occur in front of you. When someone else does something in front of you, like cuts you off in traffic, it's always that person's fault. You do not see all of the like external world shaping things happening to them.
Yeah.
It's that person making a bad choice. And that's the bias that I think we have a lot of time. And that can feed in a really negative way when you're running a game, towards thinking that like, oh, this person, the reason they're bored is in their head. It's their fault.
Right.
When it may not even be a fault situation at all. So I think you just got to keep open and remember to not take it personally unless it is deliberately aggressive over a number of game sessions. And then you can very much take it personally and kick that person the fuck out of your group.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see boredom be deliberately aggressive.
Well, I have a goal for next time you run.
I don't know if I've ever seen that, but I can imagine it. You know, when I think of boredom, I think of just like a detached state.
I've seen it.
Well, what does that look like? Like that, I think that's a whole different thing. Is like if they're purposely not paying attention to you, I don't call that boredom. I call that passive aggression.
Do you remember the Kobold Room with Cheater John?
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Okay. Gee, I wonder who was exhibiting it then.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wasn't calling you out. I'm just saying I've seen it. And I was reminding you that you were running the game when it happened.
Yeah. I've run a lot of games.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my aggressive boredom involved a Warforged removing his mechanical genitalia and describing the oil leaking out of it. Because
that's not something you did. That's something a player did at your table when you were
yeah, because they were bored, because in there I hadn't given them an engaging choice, because when they wanted to jump into the water to push the boat, I said, you do see a lot of sharks in the water.
Right.
And then they turned into a shark, and then the sharks attacked them, a thing I had telegraphed would happen if you jump in the water. Yeah. And they said, why would they attack me? I'm a shark now too. And I'm like, have you ever seen a feeding frenzy? And then they got back on the boat, and this person like ripped their mechanical genitalia off as a Warforged and described the oil leaking out. So aggressive or step beyond, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess that speaks to a larger question that we should address, which is like, why does this happen? You know what I mean? Like we talked about how to notice that somebody is bored, like what may cause boredom, but like, why does this happen? Like what causes player characters to like detach from your game and check out? Like we talked about how people are on their phone, and I gave the example of like, you know, and with our con example of an overbearing GM, but like, why does a person choose to detach then? Because that's like that's a more passive aggressive style of boredom.
I mean, well, we all carry these computers with algorithms designed to get our attention and deliver dopamine to keep us engaged with these things so they can advertise things to us. So that's really hard to compete with. I think there's one of the things I was going to say earlier. I don't remember if I got to it or not, but one of the things I was saying when I made that point near the beginning of the episode about like, is the behavior disruptive or not?
Mm-hmm.
If the behavior is not disruptive to the flow of play, most of the time I'm going to let it go. If that person like is showing a boredom behavior, like not necessarily listening, but they're ready when I get to them and it comes to their turn, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that I just developed a really thick skin over my decade as a teacher of trying to compete again with the highly engineered computers designed to like get your attention and keep it.
Yeah. So what you're describing is just a general state of detachment for some or most of the play experience. There's no passive aggression with it. There's no apathy with it. There's no attitude with it. It's just like they're just not paying attention until it's their turn or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're taking their turn. It's short and sweet and it's done. And you don't have a problem with that. Whereas I don't have a problem with that in one game. I have a problem with that becoming a pattern of behavior. You know what I mean? Like, we're all here to do a thing, you know? If it happens once, this is something else to consider, Sam, is like, if your players consistently bored? You know what I mean? Is this consistent, repetitive behavior? If you have a bored player, there could be any number of things that are happening in their life. You know, maybe they shouldn't have come to game. Maybe there's something else going on for them. But then they were like, no, this is a social contract. If I don't show up, it's going to impact the group.
Jesse's going to be so fucking pissed, and I don't want to deal with it.
Like, I'll just show up. I'll just do my turn when it's my turn. I'll eat some chips, and then I'll go home, right? Like, I've been in that situation before. You know, you know you're not going to be a fun person to be around. That's kind of my MO. People in my life know that there are times where I am not a fun person to be around, but I still showed up. And the whole point is, like, I tried to show up. I tried to show you that I wanted to be here. Maybe I shouldn't have, right? So I think that's another thing. It's like, so maybe I guess what we're saying is, like, classify the kind of boredom that you're encountering in order to deal with it, right? Maybe that's the best place to start, even though we've been talking about this for like 30 minutes, it seems.
Well, it's a great topic. Thanks,
it is.
Sam.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing to kind of dissect, but would you agree with that? Is like step one, identify what kind of boredom it is. And you don't have to do that in the moment.
Step one is check in privately. Like, if they're on their phone, be like, hey, I need a bathroom break, and then text them and be like, hey, are you okay? Like,
yeah.
Like, one, you look compassionate. Two, you're calling them out, but not in public. And three, you know, they'll tell you if they're not. And then you can, you know, move on from there. I was going to say, and this is so great because Sam was an expat teacher in another country.
Okay.
Like I was. Sam also has a beard and wears glasses.
Oh, okay.
And really likes Eberron quite a bit. Not as much as Chris loves the Forgotten Realms.
Friend of the show.
But yeah, he enjoys Eberron quite a bit. So one of the things I was going to say about dealing with the boredom at the table is it's very similar to classroom management in that most of it is preemptive.
Okay. Describe.
Like in like if you're going to do classroom management, like for teaching, there's a checklist that you should run through to ask yourself, like, do I have a good variety of activities? Am I being fair in how I'm calling on people? Like all of that stuff, like, is the room arranged well? Like, can everybody see the materials? Like all that is teaching classroom management tips. And it's all really great to use as a dungeon master. Mm-hmm. Like, am I being fair with who I'm calling on at different scenes, whose backstory I'm bringing up, all that kind of stuff. Do I have my table set up in a way where everybody is one person like kind of stuck in the corner and can't really reach the map or whatever? You know, like a U shape is the best for when you're doing a lecture with conversation. Like these are all proactive, preemptive elements that you can take. Do I have in my session prep? And if you follow the lazy DM way that we've recommended many times, you probably will have these elements. Do I have enough variety of encounters and scenes to keep everybody interested? What is your tick for sharing spotlight? Like have a plan. Like you could go clockwise. This is one of the things I've been learning running Shadow Dark, where we do turns in initiative order because we have such a big group most of the time. At my work game, we have 1 hour to play and 12 people, and we can get 2 or 3 actions per person in because I just start on one side and go, okay, your turn, what do you do? Your turn, what do you do? What do you do? And then we just go around and surprisingly, everybody's engaged.
Right.
Like, I don't know how that's happening, but Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love that. What I do, and maybe this can be helpful, is I keep a tally of who I'm giving the spotlight to. If it's in person, I'll probably have a piece of paper and I will put a symbol. I never put anybody's name or character's name. I'll have a symbol for each player at my table. And then when I give somebody the spotlight, or when somebody interjected and got their moment, or if somebody said something that was funny, even if it wasn't related to the game, some mode of participation, I will mark down a tally, right? And I will just do that so that I can look down at my piece of paper or on my screen when we're playing over Zoom, and I can be like, oh shit, John he's got one tally, everybody else has 2 or 3 tallies. Hey, John, what does your character think about this situation, and start asking them questions, So it's like, if you just want to keep a simple, tally sheet of like who you're giving the spotlight to, just to make sure that you've got everybody covered, you could do that as well.
When we talk about giving the spotlight, I feel like I know, but for our listeners,
yeah,
what does that mean? What are some ways to give someone the spotlight?
The easiest way is to ask them what their character thinks about a particular thing that either just happened, or give them the first opportunity to do something about something that just happened. That's in this, as far as I'm concerned, that's the spotlight. Is you focus on one player character, you immediately give them agency over the scene in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
How they react to the situation.
I like leading emotional questions. How does this remind you of a time that you severely failed?
Yeah.
How does this remind you of your dead parents?
Right. I try to do it in some circumstances where, if something just happened in the scene, I will kind of give a little bit of a recap of like, oh, okay, well, the kobold got shot in the back, and it had all these things on its back. It had a jar full of maggots, and it had a scorpion in a cage, but it also had a vial of acid, and the vial of acid got punctured, and now it's spurting everywhere. Kurt, what do you think happens next?
Throwing people like that. You are so good at this now. I see you being really purposeful with it.
Yeah.
Like the asking people to fill in a color detail.
Right.
For the scene, to give them agency over the world and encourage that sort of group storytelling writer's room approach.
And that comes from Dungeon World, which was one of the level up moments for me. That writer's room approach, like, let the players impact, oh, the trap got triggered, nobody got hurt, it was diffused in the process, but now it's leaking oil. What happens? Like, how much oil is in this thing? Jesse, how much oil is in this thing? It's starting to spread across the floor. What happens next? What did you say?
4 gil.
So, like, what do you think is giving the spotlight then?
No, I was just going to say, like, I just want to make sure we defined what we mean, because it's not necessarily like your turn in combat, or like you deliver a monologue. It's questions most of the time, I think, for both of us.
I want to be very clear. A person's turn is not the spotlight.
Yeah.
Everybody's turn should be a given, a granted, a norm of the game. Everybody is supposed to get a turn. Everybody is supposed to get their turn in combat to take their action. I don't consider that the spotlight. The spotlight is where the magic starts to happen. The spotlight is when that combination of storyteller instruction and player agency meet, and then something starts to come about from it. It's that
I just realized
moment.
I think from a player perspective, as my last 2 main characters in the campaigns we've been playing in together being martial characters, my turn in combat is my spotlight.
Yeah, but that makes sense though, because of who you are as a GM and a player, you do more with your turn than the average player does. The average player, in my opinion, when their turn in combat comes around, they go, okay, well, Eldritch Blast on the fourth goblin, I'm going to drop him eventually after, he's wounded. He's got to go down eventually. All right, roll it. And to me, that's not the spotlight. That's a turn. What you do is differently. What you do is different. Like when you play like Seamus or Berdine or whatever, you've already put a flourish into whatever you're doing.
Why play a monk if you're not going to be really kinetic with your descriptions of what you're doing?
Because people play characters for different reasons. Like some people are just playing the monk because they like how much they've changed in 5e 2024, and there may be an element that seems kind of broken to them. So you've got a bored person at your table, you start engaging them, asking questions. Any other tips or tricks? Like what would you typically do with a student then?
I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like ask them a question. Like even if it's like just a simple, like one of the tricks I always used to do as a teacher is I'd be like, I'd write something on the board or be about to write something on the board and I'd ping someone who looked bored and I'd have two markers and be like, hey, which color marker should I use?
Mm-hmm.
Like they made a choice and that little bit of agency. Oh, check that one off on the bingo cards. Jesse said agency.
There you go.
Yeah, that little bit of agency, like people feel like, I have a stake. I have a control over what goes on in here. It's small, it's little, it's silly.
Yeah.
But like I'm elicited. So yeah. I mean, I think you could maybe do that with like, you see somebody bored and you got some monsters and be like, hey, who does this goblin attack?
Yeah.
Like just give people some choices to snap them back in. Be like, hey, I am paying attention to you.
Right.
Can you pay attention to me?
Yeah. I think, kind of based on what you just said, it just occurred to me that we should also clarify that like this is not necessarily your problem as the dungeon master. Like, I think that's important to mention.
Yeah. That's another reason not to take it personally.
Exactly. You are responsible for creating this game and running this game. And if somebody is going to be bored and check out of your game, you could just let them do that, right? So one of two things will happen. Either they will continue to show up for some fucking reason and be bored at your game. And if you don't want to deal with that headache, don't. Focus on the people who are actively participating.
That's also the same advice from a teacher.
Give them more spotlight, right? And the second scenario is that person will eventually find their way out of that game, or they will start becoming passive aggressive or disruptive or apathetic. And then I guess you have to ask them to leave or whatever. Or maybe the group will do it for you. But I think it's important to stress that like if one of your players is bored, maybe that's not your problem. Like maybe they're just in the wrong group. Maybe this is not the kind of game they came to play. Maybe they wanted to move into the next room and kill the fucking orcs because this game's on a goddamn timer and these three assholes are fucking role-playing in a fucking speedrun D&D session. And they're ruining your good time.
But it was so funny.
Yeah. So consider that also. Now, what do you do if your entire group seems bored or most of your group seems bored? Because this has happened to me before.
Take a break from DM. I mean, like if I have never had that happen. It sounds like a worst case scenario, nightmare scenario where multiple sessions, the same group of people are majority bored.
Yeah.
While I'm doing it.
And they, for some reason, keep showing up, but don't want to say anything. Like, hey, Matt, this game is just a little too weird for us. We don't understand what you're trying to do. It seemed kind of cool in the beginning, but it's not working. Can we try something else? Like maybe they're just kind of hoping you'll get the vibe that they're putting out there. I think if you notice your whole group being bored, maybe you stop session or maybe after session or before game starts next time. You just say, hey, I noticed everybody was kind of checked out last time. And I kind of want to...
No harm, no foul. I ain't mad about it, but just,
But I do want to figure it out. Yeah.
If there's things I can do to help you have a better time while we're playing this, I'd like to do those things.
What's working, what's not working in this situation, because it seemed like everybody was kind of bored. And what you may get a response of is people are like, oh, no, it was fine for me. And you're like, are you sure? Because it seemed like a bit checked out. And it's like, oof, dude, last week I was just shot. Trained. Work was, I had a 50-hour work week last week. My kid, was sick, I'm just drained. I was just happy to be here,
We're back to have an adult conversation as the solution to the problem.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
We should add that to the Jaunty Mandis bingo cards. Have an adult conversation.
Yeah. So let's talk about things you definitely shouldn't do when you notice your players being bored to kind of round us out here.
Don't adversarially call them out at the table right then and there.
Yeah. Don't invent some sort of weird mechanic that starts making their character's life miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I never understood that concept.
Don't inflict lycanthropy on them unless they're into it.
John,
if you listen, I was into the lycanthropy. Just I think you know that, but yeah.
And definitely don't assume the worst, kind of take a page out of stoicism and be like, this isn't the end of the world. It doesn't have to be anybody's fault. This might not even be about you.
It'd be kind of crazy to assume you could control what happens in other people's heads.
Yeah. You don't have to be in control of the world because you're not.
Yeah, it's impossible, actually.
Even though it's a fantasy world that you created with your imagination, Jesse.
I would say just one other thing to do is to check your encounters. And because we've been talking about this for like an hour now and we're at the end, I'm going to throw back to a previous episode. So much of effective encounter design that Maddie's been doing in the level 1 to 20 campaign is covered in our episode about the index card RPG. So if you haven't listened to that one from our review season, which was season 3, go back and check out what is the index card RPG, and you'll get so many great, or actually check out the book, but listen to us first and then talk about the book. And then you could read the book. It will help your reading. Encounter design is the other preemptive thing.
True story.
Recap, final summary?
Yeah. Hey, boredom is a thing. It's not always about you.
Don't take it personal.
Don't take it personally. Handle it like a stoic would. You can't control everything, and nor should you try.
But a lot of the stuff you can do to minimize the chances of it happening, to be prepared if you're being a stoic, is to preemptively make sure that you're running down your checklist of, am I being fair? Am I giving people the spotlight? Do I have the environment set up in a cozy way to elicit this kind of community and responses and talking and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. And try to keep it simple. When you go to engage players or give them the spotlight, keep it simple. Ask basic questions. Give them a little bit of agency over what's happening in the world. Let them, you don't have to give them the whole kit and caboodle. You don't have to give them, control over a character or events in the game, but maybe just ask them how their character feels about it or reacts to it,
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. And I guess just to reiterate one last time, find a gaming group that loves your game the way Chris loves the Forgotten Realms, and you'll never work a day in your life.
Wow. Sage wisdom.
So get out there and look at your phone while you're playing or some shit.
Yeah, don't look at your phone. Yeah. Be the change you want to see at the table. And don't look at your goddamn phone.